Dr. Hunter, Mr. Smith.
You can hear me? Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and distinguished members of the committee, my name is Philip T. Smith, and I'm honored to testify today. As the president of a firearms organization, this is a needed national conversation regarding firearms, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Vallejo, California, and graduated from the University of California, Davis. I am married to my lovely wife, Gwen Smith, of 20+ years, and have 3 kids. And I'm also a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. I am the president and founder of the National African American Gun Association. We are the largest black firearms organization in the history of the United States and have grown to over 48,000 members with 120 chapters and members in every state. We are a pro-2A, pro-constitutional carry, and a pro-black firearms organization with no apologies. We have grown tremendously in 7 years with a diverse base of folks joining. You name it, and we have that person within our organization. What is especially significant is the surge of black women joining. Yes, black women are coming, and they are coming in large numbers. Currently, they are the fastest group of new gun owners in the United States, and I am proud to say they are the backbone of the National African American Gun Association. Never before have this many black people in the United States had guns. It is estimated that at least 14 million currently have firearms in their homes. What is happening is that our community has awoken, and we are taking steps to protect ourselves legally. Today at this hearing, I'm representing the millions of black people in this country, past and present, that have been unable to seize the opportunity to protect themselves through the Second Amendment. I will be their voice. I will be their defender. The history of black Americans in this country is well documented, with slavery being a social and legal burden that we had to fight. But what isn't as well known is that there were laws called the Black Code starting in 1865 that prevented black folks from owning any type of firearm in their possession. If a black person was caught with a gun, they could be killed, no questions asked, on the spot. The goal of these laws were to keep the black community under control and defenseless. Today, in 2022, restricting American citizens from purchasing firearms has the same effect as the Black Codes of 1865. The end result is people, especially black folks, are unable to secure a gun, which leaves them vulnerable. To me, that is unacceptable and un-American. The recent Supreme Court decision, New York State Rifle and Pistol versus Bruin, will now allow millions of gun owners whose rights were restricted to exercise those rights, as crime has significantly larger impact on black communities. It is even more important we have the ability to defend ourselves, exactly as the decision affirmed. Focusing on banning rifles like the AR-15 is an exercise in futility. It is in direct conflict with the Second Amendment, robs us of our right to use the best tools available to defend ourselves, and will only result in those who have access to the money and privilege of private security and the means to defend themselves. The misinformation about the AR-15 is incredible, with public figures making statements that have no truth or facts about the firearm. Let me demystify the firearm right now so we all can be on the same page. The AR-15 is not a fully automatic machine gun like the M16 used by the military. It is a semi-automatic rifle. In other words, you pull the trigger once and only one bullet comes out. Just like a pistol, just like a shotgun. Banning the AR-15 will not have any impact on violence. Studies have already shown this from the previous ban in the 90s. Bad people with bad intent will still have guns to cause harm to our most vulnerable Americans, black Americans. You can't pass laws to solve the human condition of violence or evil. We must look at the root cause of these shootings, and that requires tough, uncomfortable conversations within our nation. Thank you for allowing me to address this committee and this serious subject matter in our country today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Professor Blacker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, you talked about the increase in the number of African Americans who purchase firearms, including African American women, in the recent past. What do you attribute that to?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It's multifaceted, but the one overriding thing that I'm seeing from my perch as the president of the organization is that Black women, like all Americans, feel that they need to be able to protect themselves. They're not waiting for some guy on a white horse to fly in and save them. They want to be able to protect themselves. If someone breaks into their home at 2 o'clock in the morning, they don't have the time to tell the robber or someone who's breaking their home, hold on, wait a second, let me call the police. They have to be able to deal with that threat right then and there, and that's what they're doing. Women en masse are taking upon themselves to be very independent and self-reliant, and they are purchasing firearms.
Where do you live?
I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Are you familiar with the fact that last year alone, there were 836 homicides in Chicago?
I understand Chicago is a very interesting place in terms of violence, yes.
Do you have an opinion whether that violence is predominantly caused by criminal street gangs?
I've talked about this many times in many conversations, interviews. If we're really serious about helping poor folks, and let's be specific, we're talking about poor Black and brown folks. Give them jobs. Take away super incarceration of them at an earlier age where they have 2 or 3 felonies by the time they're 23 and 24 years of age. Give them the ability to go out and secure employment. Those folks out there are doing what anyone else would do if you can't find a job. They'll sell drugs, they'll beat people up, they'll do whatever it takes to take care of those babies that they have at home, and they have kids at home. But we have to, as a country, to save them, is to do something other than say, well, those guys are bad, let's just throw them in jail, when again and again, more and more are coming like them. We have to think holistically to get a solution. And for me, my personal belief, and I'm not a scholar like some of the folks on this table, but I'm a Black man who's 63 years of age, has been in this country for a long time. And if you give folks employment, if you give them a reason to buy into the American dream, like all of us have been able to do it to a certain extent in this room, you'll see dramatic changes in people's behaviors and what they believe and what they don't believe in.
Thank you for your explanation of what an assault rifle is in reality. It is a semi-automatic rifle, correct?
That is correct.
And is an AR-15 the only type of semi-automatic rifle on the market?
There's a multitude of guns. I mean, there's so many manufacturers out there building guns. You have a lot of choices. But one thing I wanted to point out that I brought up in my statement, when you pull the trigger on a AR, it is no different when you pull the trigger on a pistol or shotgun. Only one bullet comes out.
Well, that's an important point because I think a lot of people are under the misimpression that it's an automatic weapon, for example.
That is correct.
In terms of the mechanism by which a semi-automatic rifle works, is it in principle any different from, let's say, a semi-automatic pistol or other semi-automatic weapon?
The similarities are pretty even in terms of and I'm not a gunsmith and I'm not a person that puts together guns, but when you buy a pistol or you're buying a shotgun, the mechanism to pull the trigger is relatively the same. One pull of the trigger will produce one bullet coming out of that particular gun.
So if Congress were to take up the suggestion of banning assault weapons, a semi-automatic weapon, is there any reason in principle why that same ban would not apply to other types of firearms?
I'll say this, and I appreciate the answer, the question, Senator. I say this a lot to my folks. Gun rights and gun violence are 2 separate conversations and 2 separate events. But what happens when we have this deeply passionate conversation, we merge those 2, and we refuse to look at the nuances. To me, if we're really serious about helping folks, stop looking at restriction after restriction after restriction, law after law after law after law. It's obvious. You can throw 100 laws on that wall right there, and I can fill this room up with a whole bunch of folks that back my position. But we need to look at what's going to really solve the issue, and that's looking at the human condition. And that's what we're all failing to do in this room right now. People are hurting, people are scared, and people are in trouble.
You're familiar, aren't you, with the fact that 60% of the gun deaths in America are suicides? Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, your organization filed an amicus brief in the New York Rifle Association versus Bruin case. In that case, you cited you cited discriminatory and racial motivations behind gun control policies. Can you tell me how gun control policies like bans on semi-automatic rifles and magazine restrictions negatively impact minorities like members of your organization?
Thank you, Senator. I'll give you a great example. Oftentimes in my organization, as I said, we have over 48,000 members, very robust, very active. Oftentimes I'll get an email from a single black mom who's living in a quote-unquote challenged area who says, "Hey, Phil, I just bought a AR-15. Thank you for the organization. Thank you for the training," because she now feels she's able to protect herself. If you implement a lot of these proposals that I'm hearing today, lots and lots of black single women, lots of black men who are trying to get protection in these tough neighborhoods, hood, whatever you want to call it, are not going to be able to do that. That's why they're discriminatory in their long-term effect on our community. So I'm opposed to anything along those lines.
Could you tell me why bans on so-called assault weapons and standard capacity magazines are not effective and only serve to limit an individual's constitutionally protected right to self-defense?
Because the bans don't work. That was been proven in the 90s. They just do not work. They only prevent my community to having the best tool possible to protect themselves. And I'll say this, for my family, it's the best firearm to protect my wife, my children, my property. It's a very good tool when used by a law-abiding citizen. That's why it's very important for us to have that access to that particular weapon.
Mr. Smith, I want to come to you, if I may. There was just a mention about not being sure how many defensive gun uses there were every year. The CDC estimates that there are between 60,000 and 2.5 million defensive gun uses every year. And they also estimate that there are 39,700 gun-related deaths every year in the U.S. And you have talked a little bit about the importance of a firearm, possession of a firearm for self-defense. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to elaborate on that while I have a few seconds left.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's critically important, particularly for my community, to have access to protect themselves at a very basic human level. For years and years, as probably everyone knows in this room, we have not had access to firearms like other communities outside of the black community. So my organization goes out and literally educates our folks on what a gun is, what a gun isn't, how to purchase a gun, how to hold a gun, how to get trained in going to the range, all the intimate things that you need to know as a firearm and gun owner. We go over those things with our community. That's why our organization has such a strong following, and our folks are very, very trained when they go to the range. You just don't jump into our organization, grab a gun, and run to the range. That doesn't happen that way. All of our sessions are certified, and all of our folks know how to handle the gun at a very intimate level. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're doing so well.
I actually feel you in a lot of what you've been saying today, and as a time that people just want to sink into partisan divisiveness, I want to just affirm the fact that you and I agree on a lot of things, with the exception of the fact that the Omegas are better than the Alphas. So you don't get to return, I get to ask the questions. So let's just be clear. We know the history of African Americans and the entire history of this country being overwhelmingly the victims of horrific violence, from the killing of 4 girls in a bombing in Birmingham to the killing of Breonna Taylor asleep in her own house, from massacres that have happened like Tulsa, Oklahoma, including massacres like we saw in a church in South Carolina. You would agree about the natural instinct for communities to want to defend themselves, like Black Panthers did in Oakland or in, as you're seeing with black women now, correct?
Absolutely.
So you and I also agree that we need to, with urgency, end this kind of violence in the United States of America. You said that in your testimony. And so I want to point out some things that I find outrageous that I actually think you probably find outrageous too. So the first is that we don't invest in community so violence doesn't happen in the first place. And something you said already, correct, like finding jobs. Number 2, I introduced a bill called Break the Cycle of Violence Act that was included in the bipartisan compromise to do community violence intervention, because from Oakland to New York City, there are strategies that are about empowering communities that actually lower violence. You agree with me on that?
Absolutely.
You and I agree that most of the crimes happening in communities like ours, I'm the only senator, to my knowledge, that lives in a low-income black and brown community for the last 25 years. And what kills me is that every single shooting when I was mayor, except for one that we could find, happened with a person who was not qualified to buy a gun that was able to get that gun. You agree in general that's the truth, right?
Repeat that last part.
That most of the crimes in communities like ours are happening because people who do not qualify to buy a gun, criminals, find a way to get a gun, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and so you and I would probably agree that this nation should have universal, thorough background checks, correct?
Yes, I support background checks.
I know you do. Number two, the trace data. When these crimes happen in communities like mine, the clearance rates on murders is so low that communities are like, why can't we get the bad people behind? But yet we have laws that prevent people from doing research on trace data. You think that's absurd, yes?
I would agree, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. You don't have to hesitate so much. I'm not trying to trap you here, man.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
Okay, so here you and I could go down a long list of things that would make all of us safer that we don't do because friends of mine block us in this body that would make communities like yours and mine a lot safer. Correct? We can find bipartisan things that we could do today. Like take the ATF. It's the one law enforcement organization. We've increased budgets massively for every law enforcement, but we hand strap the ATF and don't allow them to do their job. We don't allow them to keep computer records of things that are going on. That's kind of absurd to stop law enforcement from doing their job, right?
I think where you and I differ, and I see a lot of similarities.
Especially haircut, but go ahead.
Beautiful hair, beautiful hair. I think when it comes down to looking at, let's be clear, I believe that having an AR-15 is a value add to my family.
Sir, I'll get to the AR-15. I'm just trying to establish the foundation.
We have commonalities, sure, but there's differences. There's nuances.
but Americans have a lot of agreement on this issue, even folks that are Republican witness and some Democrat from Jersey. So let me just switch to one thing, though, that I take issue with, but turn to Hunter, and you can talk to me later.
Sure.
You said that pulling a trigger, AR-15, pulling a trigger, it's just one trigger. These are similar than a pistol or a shotgun. At the top of my block a few years ago, Shahad Smith was killed with an assault rifle. The police and one of the police officers said to me, it was as if when that bullet hit him, his head exploded. Can you explain for the record the difference between a one-shot pistol versus one of these assault weapons that are used in war zones?
From a functional standpoint, there is no difference between a...
Sir...
But hold on, let me answer. You answer the question, let me answer. When you take a shotgun, an AR, or a rifle, it's a one-trigger system.
Yes.
Are some systems or some shotguns or rifles stronger than others? Absolutely. But the mechanics are the same.
I don't disagree with anything that you said. Everything you said there is factual. But would you, Dr. Hunter, excuse me, would you please explain?
Thank you very much. So this weapon was chosen by the United States Army in Vietnam because it was designed to shoot through a standard issue military helmet at 500 yards. It was designed to kill someone wearing a military helmet at 500 yards. So what that does to a civilian who's wearing nothing, a baseball cap, is liquefy organs. That is the intent of this round. Yes, one trigger pull, but this round, the way it was designed, was to do as much damage as quickly as possible and to kill enemy soldiers wearing a standard issue military helmet.
And I'm just going to close it because I'm out of time, and I want to ask the mayor